Welcome to another episode of The Unseen Paranormal, where some of the scariest things are unseen. I'm your host, Eric Freeman. Hey everybody, today we're welcome back to the show our friend Steve Stockton. Steve is a researcher, storyteller, and author of the Paranormal, Supernatural, and High Strangeness. We're going to discuss his new book, National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. You can find his books and this book and others on Amazon, Kindle, and wherever fine books are sold. You can also hear more of Steve's stories of the paranormal and high strangeness on his YouTube channels, 13 Past Midnight and Missing Person Mysteries. Welcome back to the show, Steve. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Eric. Thanks for having me back. Always a pleasure.
So you got this new book out. It is awesome. I really enjoyed reading it. And I like how you broke it down into different categories. So it's all about the Smoky Mountains, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge area in East Tennessee. And so not only do you have the missing person stuff, because a lot of people go missing up there, but you did a lot of other stuff, Native American legends and strange plane crashes and haunted places. We'll start with some of the haunted places up there, because there's lots of haunted stuff because there's so much history in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. There was actually more than I could fit in the book, but I tried to hit some of the more well-known ones and then some of the lesser well-known ones and strike a little bit of balance there.
Yeah, one of the ones that caught my attention that I didn't know, had never heard of, I know people who've stayed there, was the Holiday Inn Sunspree.
Yeah, there was some fairly spectacular murders there back in the late 70s, early 80s. Now, it's gone. The building is physically gone. But they had to close that room off where those happened because a lot of the workers wouldn't go in there and people would hear screams and stuff coming from there when it was empty. And that whole little corner there was kind of supposedly haunted. You had the murders in those rooms, and then there was like a bunkhouse type thing out back, or a dinner place out back where they would feed like troops of Boy Scouts and things that came through. That was one of the other rumors is supposedly haunted by some Boy Scouts that their scoutmaster murdered. And then the guy that worked as the cook in that cookhouse there, Alvin, he supposedly took his own life and then haunted the cookhouse. Now, last time I checked, it was still there, but the Holidome, the Sunspree Resort, that's gone. There is another Holiday Inn on that same road. Used to be Airport Road. It's a Historic Nature Trail Road now, but if you go to that one and ask about the murders, they won't have any idea what you're talking about.
Well, and some of that may be, because some stuff is built on that land. It could, whatever's there now could be haunted as well.
That's what I was thinking. Last time I looked at it on Google Earth, it was a vacant lot. But I'm thinking, they'll build something there because nothing ever stays empty for too long up there. And probably have no idea what they build on. And there's still maybe residual hauntings there. Same way on the same road, just a little farther down, the Rocky Top in there. I think it's been replaced now by another hotel, but there's very famous in East Tennessee anyway, Rocky Top murders. That's where they happened. Local thug named Tattoo Eddie that was all over the news that participated in those murders, and they didn't have any idea who did it, but then they found a confession written out and left in a phone booth by one of the two or three that did it. But that was really scary. The round back where the hotel used to be, there was a water feature back there, like a fountain area. And they would hear screams back there and would see a pair of female legs, but only from like the knees down, run across the parking lot and go around behind the fountain and disappear.
Wow.
Now, to me, I'd rather see a full body apparition. I can handle that. I've seen them before.
Yeah.
But a pair of disembodied legs, no, thank you. And that seems to be occasionally pops up. I know in Mammoth Cave up in Kentucky, they've spotted a pair of legs in overalls running down the side of a hill that disappeared. That has to do, I think, with the ghost of Floyd Collins, who famously got trapped and died inside there back in I think it was the 20s or the 30s. But yeah, count me out on the partial.
Yeah.
There's something more frightening about that.
Yeah, just seeing a body part or like a hand or legs or something, it's a little creepier than actually seeing the full apparition.
Or even a head. I think I could handle a floating head or something, but just something about legs running around, or hands or arms. Another, and this is kind of art imitating life or life imitating art. There, for years and years, there was an attraction there on the Parkway in Gatlinburg called, I think it used to be just called Hauntings, and then it was Hauntings on the Parkway, or maybe the other way around. And it was a turn of the last century spook show, like things that people really believed in back then, where you would go in and there was a medium on stage and they would put the curtain over them, and suddenly a tambourine would play and a bell would ring and the assistant would whip the curtain back and the medium's still sitting there with their hands tied together. And they'd do the spirit slates where the audience would ask a question, and then they put the spirit slates in with the medium, open them back up, and then the slates would have writing on them. And it's just a lot of trickery and things that, like I said, people actually believed in. It was really popular after the First World War. A lot of people lost loved ones and tried to contact them by any means, and there was people out there that took advantage of that. So it was done up like that. I mean, it was frightening the way it was presented. It was dark in there, very small theater, seated maybe, I don't know, 25 or 30 people, but it was a good show. And but what happened? One of the managers, what I've heard his name was Dan or Ron or Don. It's in the book there. Sorry, I just spaced on it. But he was closing one night. Everybody else had gone home. He suffered a heart attack during his last walk through the little auditorium there and fell down dead behind the back row of seats. Well, the next morning, the person shows up to open up and thought, well, things don't look just right, but apparently he had done most of his job before, and like I said, this was the final walkthrough. But all the employees wore all black. So this guy was laying in the back of the auditorium behind the last row of seats in black, and nobody saw him. They didn't really even know that he was missing until it was his time to come in the evening and take over. And they got to looking around and found the guy back there dead. And it turned out some of the audience members, because they run through there pretty fast. The show was about 15 or 20 minutes, and it went all day. There'd be a 20-minute show and then maybe a 10-minute break and then another 20-minute show. And they would pack them in and out. And some of the people, the tourists that had actually saw the body back there and thought it was part of the spooky atmosphere, because they did have, skeletons and crystal balls and spider webs and things like that in there. So somebody actually did die in there, and then he came back to haunt the hauntings. After that, there were stories of things that they know were put away the night before being moved the next day and left out. And one of the most popular stories of things that happened was they would clean those spirit slates and put them away the night before. And then the next day when they took them out to start the show, the first performance, the name of the night manager was written on those slates. And there was stories of low moans and cries coming from within the darkened theater when there was nobody there, when there was no audience there, and just the people that worked there. And a lot of the females in particular would get touched in the dark, even when there was no audience present, or if they were closing up at night or whatever, the lights would go off and on. A lot of just spooky happenings, and they attributed it to the guy that died in there. And eventually it got to the point that they couldn't keep employees. Anybody local, knew the stories and didn't want anything to do with it. And last time I looked, it's the building is still there, but now it's a laser tag place. So again, it's dark. People run around in there, and I thought about that. I wonder if there's people that, especially girls, that get touched in the dark and have no idea that it's the ghost of the lonely night manager still hiding in the building there.
Yeah, and like we were saying about the sun spree, even though it's not there anymore, they built something there. It could very well be haunted. I imagine that laser tag is.
Yeah,
you talk to some employees, they probably have some stories.
I would say so. That's next time I'm up there, I want to go there and talk to them. So I haven't been since it's been anything other than hauntings. And then right kind of up behind where that is, that's things, the names of things change up there. That used to be Tipton Terrace Mall right there where that is. I don't think it's called that anymore, but right behind there on the hill, there was an old hotel, like with these tiny little cabins that had fallen into disrepair. And those are purportedly haunted. I think most, if not all, those are gone now. There's been a mini golf place up there. There was a wax museum up there, not the normal wax museum that's further down the parkway. This was one called Stars Over Gatlinburg, and I think it's gone now too. But just behind that is White Oak Flats Cemetery. White Oak Flats is what Gatlinburg used to be known as, and there was a person named Gatlin who was just apparently a real pill and hard to deal with, and they finally basically ran him out of town, and he refused to leave. And they finally said, okay, well, if you'll leave, we'll name the town after you. So that's how supposedly Gatlinburg got its name. But White Oak Flats Cemetery is just up there on the top of the hill, just right off the parkway. I mean, you can't see it without you know what you're looking for. But it's an old cemetery. It's got a lot of the Ogles and some of the founding families of Gatlinburg that moved in, you know, or actually lived there before it was part of the park, or before the park came into existence in 1934. They have family buried up there, and it's just your typical old cemetery. You know, with stones going back to the 1800s. There may be some there from the 1700s, but they've seen everything up there from a lady in white, at least 2 ghost dogs, black shapes, weird lights flitting among the tombstones. Just like I said, typical haunted cemetery. Ghostly cries and moans, a little bit of everything up there, and most people have no idea that it's there. It's literally right behind those shops up on the hill. That would be on the right side of the parkway if you're going out back towards Pigeon Forge.
And one of the things you did in the book is put instructions in there telling where places were at, and also if the staff would talk to you, or you know, if it would be easy to get in there and actually, you know, talk to somebody about the paranormal stuff.
Some places it is, some places it isn't. It just depends. I like the hauntings stuff. They would talk about it, but they didn't. They were kind of scared of it. The Holodome, it was hard to find anybody, maybe some maids and things that avoided that room. They would tell you the stories. And there's maybe still some of those people around there that work somewhere else. Another one that happened back in the 80s that we'll talk about it is over on River Road, it runs parallel to the Parkway behind Mountain Mall, in that area back there. There's where the Mysterious Mansion is. Now, it's typical made-up haunted house. It's a haunted attraction, walk-through attraction, and it has some jump scares. You know, people in costumes jump out at you. And I sit in there to check behind the clock. There's a secret passageway through there. The paintings have the eyes cut out. You can stand up there and look out on the people coming in. And it's really creepy, done up like, you know, just a typical movie haunted house. But right next door to that, there's a hotel, several-story hotel. And back in the 80s, a little girl fell off the balcony of the hotel there and landed in the creek that you have to cross to get over there to it. And there's been sightings of her down in the water pointing up toward the balcony. And then there's also reports that they've seen the girl fall off the balcony. And then when they go down there to look, there's nothing there. It's like a residual haunting that replays over and over. That one, it'd be hard pressed to find anybody that'll talk about it. I mean, it's understandable. It's the whole town runs on tourism, and you get too many spooky places, and people won't want to come. But that one, you can stand on the sidewalk and see all that. But if you cross the little bridge over where the hotel proper is, then technically you're trespassing. If you want to investigate that one, I'd get a room there. And again, you might be able to find some old timers that would talk about it, but the staff there currently, or last time I was there, they wouldn't even acknowledge it.
Yeah. And like you said, it's a big tourist town, so a lot of people are going to be tight-lipped because they don't want to scare off the normal tourists that come in there. There are also a lot of haunted places within the park that you wrote about, around Cades Cove and some of the other places.
Yeah, Cades Cove and the North Shore of Fontana Lake are the most haunted places in the park. And that's also the places where most people have gone missing. I don't know if that's, you know, just a synchronicity or coincidence or what's going on with that. But all throughout Cades Cove, there's a tradition of haunted graveyards, spook lights, sound of a horse and buggy that goes by, then there's not anything there. You just hear it go by. Same with Fontana Lake. And there's a lot of just tiny little graveyards scattered throughout the park that a lot of people don't even know about. One of the ones that I'd visited that I was just astounded by was the graveyard of the Confederate Cherokee soldiers, I think was the way it was termed. And the only marker, there's a little crudely shaped wooden arrowhead off to one side, and you see a little path going back through there. One day I said, well, what's back there? So I walked back there, and there's, I think it's about a dozen or so graves of Cherokee that fought for the Confederacy, and then probably 3 dozen or more just scattered willy-nilly graves all over the place that belonged to their family. And apparently it was a Cherokee tradition that when you went into battle, you took your family with you. So a lot of these soldiers, the braves that were fighting on the Confederate side, they took their families into battle with them, and the families were massacred. And the soldiers themselves, they're buried in an orderly fashion. You can kind of see where those graves are. But the other graves of the family members, they're just scattered all over the place. And a few years ago, there was a guy that came in there he was a master dowser, and he was able to dowse and map out where a lot of those graves are just based on the tectonics or whatever you can. I don't understand how that works. I've known some dowsers, some water witches and things like that. They claim they could locate water with either a willow wand or a couple pieces of copper, where it would cross.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating place. There's a lot of little family cemeteries like that. You had people that lived in there years and years and years before the park ever came to be. And like I said, Roosevelt opened that in 1934, and they moved a lot of people out of the park. But it's not unusual to, especially in those areas near Fontana Lake there, if you're out just in the woods, and even some of the primitive camping areas are right next to these purportedly very haunted graveyards.
Yeah, I've heard of a trail up there. I think it's a mile long, and it's the most haunted mile or something in the mountains. There's lots of, apparently you can hike it, pretty easily, but there's lots of abandoned places and graveyards, and it's supposed to be all these stories of these different places along that just 1 mile hike.
Yeah, I know the hike you're talking about. I can't think of the name of that loop that they call it. And then you've got Elkmont, which is like a whole abandoned village up there. It was like a resort at one time, and then it's almost like a timeshare type thing. They sold those cabins to people, and then when the park came in, they eventually phased those people out. I think the last people that lived there actually moved out in the 80s. But all that's abandoned up there. There was a big hotel up there and like a spa, and this is like from the 19-teens, 1920s and things. But that's a creepy place, and it's supposedly haunted. They see lights and things up there. Now, you can go and walk through Elkmont, but all the buildings are very well marked, no trespassing, and they will get you if you go into those buildings. Although I've seen some YouTube videos where people have been brave enough to venture in there, but you risk running the wrath of the National Park Service for trespassing. And also a lot of spook lights in that area, fairy lanterns, will-o'-the-wisp, whatever you want to call it, foxfire, which foxfire, that's a naturally occurring thing. But the fairy lights up there, a lot of stories involving those where, depending on whether you were doing something you were supposed to or not, sometimes the lights would guide you out of the woods into safety or guide you deeper into the woods and get you just inexplicably lost. And there's different legends about that. The Cherokee have a legend about it being, I think it was a chief, and his daughter was going to get married to somebody that he didn't approve of, and she took off into the woods and went missing, and he's out there forever looking for her with a lantern. But I know a person that was in there one night hunting, and illegally, I might add. And there are a lot of poachers in the park. That goes on up there. It used to be a lot worse than it is now. And this was when they had to use the old carbide lanterns. It was a headlamp like the miners used, had a little calcium carbide in a tank. You put some water in there, it gives off a flammable gas. You screw that into the little thing on your cap and flicked a thing like a lighter, so there was an actual flame and a little reflector up there. And he had run out of the carbide in his lamp and was wandering around in the dark and saw what he thought was somebody with a lantern. He followed this person with the lantern and watched it go across a little clearing, he thought, and then into the woods on the other side. Well, when he started to cross what he thought was the clearing, it was actually about a 12-foot drop-off. And he went straight off of it, buried his shotgun, he said, up to the stock in the mud, And lucky he didn't get crippled. Now, this happened back in the probably mid-30s or so, not long after it had been the park. You had a lot of people that were reticent to believe in the authority of the park. And, this is the people's land. Well, hunt if they want to. And I got the tale from the son of the guy that it happened to. And but it's fascinating just to think, that there's something like that up there that could lead you astray. But the little people, the Smokies, the Cherokee, believed in them. They had a name for them. And I'll probably butcher the name. I'm not that good at pronouncing Cherokee, but it's the Yuande Tsunle, I think is the way you say it. And they just considered them another race of people, even though they were only about 2 or 3 foot high. But if you look into some of the Fey legends, the legends that come over from England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, there's almost a fairy religion over there. They believe in the Fey and all that folklore. And a lot of people have attributed that to some of the missing people that maybe they're taken by the Fae. In particular, people tend to go missing that are either in a berry patch or near a berry patch or have been picking the berries. Well, that's the fairies' food. Plus, in those berry bushes are where they have their mating rituals and also make music and dance and things. And I started doing research on this. Got 3 videos over on missing persons and mysteries about the missing and the Fae, and draws parallels with all these different missing cases and how they do relate to those legends. So it's something to think about. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of missing people up there. A lot of people are found. There's been at least 5 that I can think of off the top of my head that were never found. I think there's one more that's been added to that list recently. But Dennis Martin went missing famously or infamously on Father's Day, 1969. He'd gone up to Cades Cove with his father, his grandfather, and his brother, and they'd hiked up to an area known as Spence Field. And met another family up there also named the Martins. Now, this case is full of just weird coincidences and synchronicities like that. And they had kids, and the 2 Mr. Martins introduced themselves to each other and thought maybe it'd be a good idea for the boys to play together. So they were either playing hide and seek or were planning on sneaking up on the adults and scaring them, depending on which story you hear. But Dennis's father watched him go around behind a outcropping or a clump of brush there and said, okay, well, that's Dennis's hiding spot. But then later, after the game of hide and seek or scare the adults or whatever was over, he noticed Dennis wasn't with the other boys. And he asked him, have you seen Dennis? And they're like, no, not since we started playing the game. Well, his father had watched him hide. He goes straight to that clump of brush, nothing in there. Walked all the way around it, went inside it. No sign of Dennis. And that ended up being the last time he ever saw his son alive.
Wow.
And right after that, he sent the grandfather down to the ranger station to get some help looking for Dennis. And he took off running down the Appalachian Trail, which runs right through there by Spence Field. And it started just within a few hours there, the biggest manhunt the Smokies had ever had up to that point and maybe since. Had thousands of Park Service employees, civilian searchers, National Guard came in, the Green Berets came in, the FBI got involved. Just a lot of strange things there that normally don't happen during a missing person thing.
Yeah.
And no trace of Dennis was ever found. Now, there was a family further down in Cades Cove named the Key family that had asked a ranger where they might be able to see a bear, and he'd point them to an area, and they went over there with their kids and were looking down in this area looking for a bear. And one of the kids says, oh, there's a bear now, Dad. And Mr. Key said he looked up and said, no, that's not a bear. He saw what he described as a rugged, hairy individual running up a hillside carrying something over his shoulder. Now, this was right after they'd heard a scream. So one of the theories is that whatever that hairy creature was, that it was what took Dennis and why they never found any trace of him. And that's another legend that I get into a little bit in the book, that there are wild, feral men that live in the Smokies. Now, some people say that it's Bigfoot. Some people say that it's just people that have gone into the woods and gone off grid and stay back in there. And it's big enough. I mean, Eric, that place is over 500,000 acres. And if you've ever been out in the true wilderness, I mean, get off the trails and away from the places where people hike, you realize just how small and infinitesimal you are. And that wilderness, there's all kinds of things out there that can hurt you or kill you. So it's kind of easy when you get that far out to see how somebody could go missing and never be found and not leave any trace. I'm willing to wager that there's probably places in there that no human has ever set foot, or not for hundreds of thousands of years anyway, none that we know about.
Right.
I mean, Eric Rudolph, the Olympic bomber, he hid out in parts of the Smokies further down on the North Carolina side and down toward Georgia. And he was in those woods for several years before they finally caught him. So it is possible. And the only way he got caught, he came into town to fish stuff out of a dumpster.
Yeah, he hid out in the Nantahala forest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's about the same type terrain. Nantahalas, I think it's about the same size. I think I want to say it's either 300 or 600,000 acres, but that's some deep woods down in there. I've been to that forest, and you have that really all through the Appalachians. I've never through hiked the Appalachian Trail. That was something I always wanted to do, but I'm probably beyond that now. But the longest part I hiked, I started in Georgia, where it begins, or the terminus, depending on which way you're going, and I hiked all the way up into Virginia, there in Damascus, Virginia, where the AT goes to there, just outside of Abingdon. But it's rugged, and I think it gets worse up north. About the only state that I haven't hiked on it a little bit in is Maine, and supposedly that's some of the most treacherous parts of the Appalachian Trail. A lot of rocky stuff and steep stuff and that type of thing.
Yeah, I just being in Gatlinburg this past weekend, just having the mountains around you and the cabin we stayed in, just looking at Mount LeConte in the distance, and even the mountain that was kind of across from our cabin, it just makes you understand how small we are in this vast, planet that we're on. And because, living in towns and stuff, even in a small town like I live in outside of Nashville, you get used to people being around, and we have woods. I used to go hunting when I was a kid and that type of stuff, but I always knew, okay, well, if I walk in this direction, I'm gonna hit this road, or if I walk in this direction, I'm gonna hit this road. But out there, you could walk for days and days and days and never find any, like you were saying, get off the beaten path and never find any kind of evidence of humans, period.
Yeah. It's amazing. And if you've never experienced it, it's, experience it with caution, but it's amazing. Take a GPS and a personal locator beacon and fresh batteries for the GPS. I've had that happen. I had GPS go out once, and that was just in a state park. But thankfully it was dark, but I knew the way to go to get out of there. So you still can guide yourself by the stars if you know what to look for. That's kind of a lost art. I don't know if anybody can do that celestial navigation too much. I guess people that are, know woodlore and get out in the wilderness a lot have those skills, or even how to read a compass and a topo map. But I used to teach myself things like that. The orienteering, where you have the little map on the square plastic, or the compass on the square plastic, and you could lay it on a topo map and figure the angles. And one thing you learn very quickly is those directions that you're looking at a map, even if you can understand the topo, it's still as the crow flies.
Yeah.
And I can go right through here, but you can't. There may be a mountain between here and there, or a bluff, or anything. So you have to learn to chart around and work your way around things, and it's not always a straight shot by any means.
Yeah, and up in the Smoky Mountains, you have all the rhododendron that are just people plant them in their yards and think they're beautiful, but they're so numerous that it would be hard to navigate through those.
It's like a jungle. And the mountain laurel is like that too. It grows thick and it grows right on the ground. You get stuck in that. One of the places I talk about in the book is a place called Huggins Hell. And the Park Service won't even tell you where it's at because it's so treacherous going up that. And basically you're climbing up the side of a mountain that has a stream coming down it. So you're trying to fight the water, fight the mud, fight the slippery rocks, and all the undergrowth and vines and things. I've found some stuff on YouTube and on the internet of people that have done it, but it tends to be people like former Green Berets or Navy SEALs, or extreme outdoor people like Bear Grylls or somebody like that, that like those kind of challenges. And even then, those guys get hurt sometimes doing it.
Yeah, one of the stories out of your book that really caught my attention is because, kind of like the Dennis Martin case, Polly Melton, she just disappeared. She was with a group of people, went kind of over a little hill, and she was just gone.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's common in a lot of these missing people stories from everywhere, and somebody gets separated from the group. Either they walk ahead or they stay behind, to get a rock out of their shoe or something, and the group continues on, and then next thing they're gone. And that goes back, even dates to the fairy legends with that too in the Fae, that once you're separated from the group, you're fair game. But yeah, Polly was with a couple of friends. She was staying in the Dudley Creek area over there in East Gatlinburg, close to where we were talking about there by Pittman Center. And her and her husband had an Airstream. I think they kept it there permanently or semi-permanently, and would just come up and stay in it for so many months out of the year. Walking along with two of her friends, she walked ahead of them, went around a turn in the trail, and was never seen again. And that was 1981, I think. The hiking and skiing club that I was a part of in high school actually went up and helped in the search and rescue effort for that one, but just nothing. Now, there's been a lot of conjecture on that one. People think that she may have done a runner on purpose, but it was well orchestrated if she did. I think she was in her 60s or close to it. The man that she was married to was in his 80s, so a lot older than her, and he was in ill health. And that was one of the theories, was that she just didn't see a good future for herself coming up and disappeared. But then again, she's never turned back up. I think there was a check that was cashed with her name on it after she disappeared. But other than that, there was no sightings, no word of her. But there was some unusual things along with that, too. She volunteered at a senior center up there in that area. I think it's the one there, Pittman Center. And the day before it was either the day before she disappeared or the day that she did disappear, she was using the telephone in the place, which she'd never done before. So there's, kind of hints and allegations there that one may not be so mysterious. I guess the most mysterious part of it would be that she could disappear and just totally take on a new identity and never be found out. People have done that. I mean, look at murderer John List. He stayed disappeared for years and years and years until he was either Unsolved Mysteries or America's Most Wanted ran a segment on him, and where they had done the age progression, his neighbors recognized him, and it was him, and he just had assumed another identity, which I think that would be harder to do now that everything's digital. And like back when I was a teenager, your driver's license in Tennessee, it was just a piece of paper with your information typed on it.
Yeah.
You could have anybody's driver's license. I knew people that borrowed older kids' license to get into things they shouldn't. But, now with the holograms and your picture on there, and you've got a paper trail and a digital trail, I think it would be a lot harder to just, fade out and show up somewhere else with a new identity. It's not impossible, but I think it's a lot harder, especially if you're going to another country or somewhere like that. Now, another famous disappearance there, Trinity Gibson, she went missing in 1976. We were crosstown rivals as far as high schools, and my niece was best friends with her sister, Tina. And Trini had gone on a field trip from Bearden High School, and it was supposedly a surprise field trip. They didn't even know what their destination was until they were on the bus headed toward the Smokies. It was a biology teacher, and he was taking them up to Clingman's Dome. That's a beautiful area. Have you ever done the hike up to the Dome?
I have not.
It's beautiful up there, but it's parts of it can be rough going. I mean, they've seen older people have medical emergencies after hiking up there and stuff. So attempt it at your own risk, depending on your own health or any underlying conditions. But it is a beautiful hike up there, highest point in the Smokies. And Trini had hung around with several different groups. She'd ate lunch with one of her classmates named Robert Simpson. And she was walking with another group when they were headed back to the bus, time to go home. And they saw her walk ahead. She left that group she was with. She walked ahead. She appeared to kind of squat down and look at something off the trail. And then she stepped off the trail into the woods. And that was the last time she was ever seen alive. Stepped, into the mist of time and into the pages of history right there.
Yeah.
And again, they thought, well, did she see something that she just wanted to look at and would be right back? Or did she have to answer the call of nature and, bend down and looked, oh, there's a spot I can go. But for whatever reason, once she stepped off, that was it for her. Now, that was another one of those that people claimed that there was an older boy that she was seeing that she ran off with, and who had a car waiting down at the parking lot. But according to the bus driver that stayed with the bus, nothing like that happened. And again, if they didn't even know where they were going that day when they got on the bus, I don't know how she would prearranged for somebody to come pick her up. Now, this is a day before cell phones or anything like that. So
Right.
if somebody did pick her up, it would have had to have been prearranged. And the only thing they did find was in that area where she went missing, where they saw her step off the trail, there was a beer can and some smoked cigarette butts. And I think they claimed that those cigarettes matched ones found in the parking lot. But again, I don't, this was at a time before DNA and all that. And I'd be interested to know now if they've done any DNA on that stuff and what that might reveal. There's a lady that has a website. It's Canadian Girl, spelled GURL 77.com. She has absolutely the most extensive research on Trini Gibson of anything I've ever seen. She's talked with family. She's talked with friends. She's got scans of the high school yearbook pictures and things like that. And she has some very interesting theories, some of them that she won't even talk about publicly. And she's received death threats and things because of them, even after all these years. So
Wow.
I think she's on to something. But I talked to Trini's sister Tina years ago before she passed away. She basically drank herself to death. When this happened, Eric, it just destroyed the family unit there. The parents fought. They would blame the older brother. They would blame the younger sister. They ended up divorcing. It was just ugly. And as you can imagine, it would be for somebody to go missing. And Tina said that, she said, part of me wants to believe that Trini did run off with an older boy and she changed her name and she's still alive and happy somewhere in the sun in Southern California. She said, but in my heart of hearts, I don't think she ever left that park alive.
Yeah.
So that's, again, check out that Canadian Girl 77's website for some more in-depth stuff. I've had her on my show on Campfire Stories that I did on missing persons and mysteries, and she's got a lot of interesting stuff that she's uncovered. Things like Robert Simpson that Trini was seen hiking with. He had Trini's comb in his car afterwards. And this, back during that time in the 70s, a lot of people carried those big plastic combs in their hip pockets, and they weren't cheap. They were like $7 or $8 back then. Well, somehow hers ended up in his car. There were some other girls that went to Bearden High School that supposedly ended up with some jewelry that was Trini's that she had on when she started on the trip. So, again, it may be something more nefarious, something other than the Fae or Bigfoot or Glimmerman or whatever takes things out of the woods, takes people out of the woods. That one may have a little more human aspect to it. But still, just the fact that no trace.
Right, right. And one of the things that kind of accompanies a lot of these missing people is when they go to search for them, just weird weather events happen.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that points back to the Fae, though. There's certain types of fairies that can control the weather. And yeah, when Dennis Martin disappeared, just within a couple of hours, freak storm blew up and just torrential rainfall. And that happens in a lot of the cases. And we've studied hundreds of them literally on missing persons and mysteries. That's one of the things that happens just about every time. A snowstorm, a fog will roll in, heavy rains. And, things like that, it ruins any evidence, any trace as far as scent sometimes, or tracking dogs, because that's another thing. Tracking dogs, if they can even find a scent, they lose it right away, or they'll just sit down and refuse to go any farther. But whatever it is, and there's all these theories. There's Bigfoot, there's UFOs, there's portals, there's the Glimmer Man, which is the humanoid, translucent humanoid, like in the Predator movie. There's serial killers. There's military or government up to something. But whatever it is, and it may be a combination of all the above, it's able to do so with 100% accuracy and not leave any trace of anything. So that right there is just, that makes me believe there's a supernatural element to a lot of these cases. And because even with an animal attack, that's another thing that people try to attribute it to. With an animal attack, there's going to be signs of a disturbance. Right. There's going to be blood. There's going to be torn clothing, shoes. Now, that is one thing that does happen. They do find people's shoes, but Usually they're sitting right side by side, or they look like the person had just stepped out of them. There was one case, now this wasn't in the Smokies, this was out west, but a guy had taken off his hiking boots and walked 2 miles in 3 feet of snow. Why would you take your boots off?
Yeah, yeah.
And then they found him frozen to death. But now, one of my just pet theories on that, if you were hunting humans for sport, what would be a surefire way that you could still hunt them, but give them a little bit of a chance, not enough to get away, but slow them down a little bit? You take their shoes. That happened out here in Portland. We have the Shanghai tunnels, which is just what it sounds like. They used to Shanghai men, put them on boats at the port, and by the time they came to, after being slipped a Mickey in a bar or a brothel, they would be on a ship bound for who knows where and have to work their way back or pay off their passage. But here in the old part of Portland, some of those tunnels still exist, and you can go and tour them. And one of the things I noticed, like after they dropped you down the chute in the back of the bar or brothel after they gave you something to knock you out, still to this day down there it's sandy in the bottom of those tunnels, very dusty in there, but it's littered with broken glass. And you can tell by looking at the glass, it's, from a long, long time ago, it's the thicker glass. And that's what they would do. Before they dumped them down there, they would take their shoes, and then you go into the tunnel. Then if you do manage to wake up and come to, you can't go anywhere. Number one, it's dark. Number two, you don't know where you're at. Number three, the floor is littered with broken glass and you're barefoot.
Yeah, and with and that makes sense. If you're going to hunt somebody, like you're saying, for sport, you want to kind of slow them down, but still have
think of like The Most Dangerous Game, famous story, where a guy wants to hunt humans. Could be something like that. I mean, who knows? There's so many different ways you could conjecture that. But if animals were doing it, a big cat, anything big enough to take a human, it doesn't eat it all right then. They cache their food up in a tree, and a bear will tend to bury theirs. Now, that was an interesting thing I found in doing research for the book. Since the Great Smoky Mountains National Park came into existence in 1934, there's been a grand total of 5 bear attacks. 5.
Wow.
And only one of those was a fatality. So that's pretty good for, 80, 90 years, whatever it's up to now.
Yeah.
For only one, because that's the thing they tell you. Watch out for the bears. Stay away from the bears. Don't feed the bears, And the bears get out. They wander into downtown Gatlinburg before. I've seen some interesting videos of a bear trying to get in an ice cream shop. and not that they're not dangerous. I mean, in the springtime, you get between a mother bear and her cub, you're asking for trouble.
Right.
But they rarely attack humans. And so, the people trying to claim it's animal attacks and stuff. And something else I found out, and you mentioned this briefly earlier, the most dangerous thing you can do in the Smokies, apparently, is to fly over in a small plane. Now, since they've been keeping records, there's been over 50 plane crashes in the Smokies. So 5 bear attacks, 50 plane crashes. That's
right.
kind of weird odds there. Your chances of being attacked by a bear are about the same as getting hit by or being killed by bears, about the same as getting struck by lightning or winning the lottery. But if you fly over in a small plane, it's probably not much more than a coin toss.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I wasn't aware of with until I read your book, was about all the strange plane crashes. Kind of like a small Bermuda Triangle area that they just crash in really weird circumstances. And
yeah, there are people that call it that because you've got the plane crashes, you've got the missing people, you've got the hauntings and all this. It just, there's an energy there. There's something in those mountains. I mean, the Native Americans knew it. There's places that they avoid. They've got a legend for everything up there. But yeah, I wouldn't want to fly over the Smokies after reading that, especially in a small plane. And some of it's attributed just the mist that rises up off those mountains that gives them their name.
Yeah,
it can apparently gather real thick and real fast and rise up, and then before you know it, you're in a fog bank or this strange mist that they call it the Smoky Mountains from. So, and as far as I know, though, they've recovered all the bodies out of those crashes, but there are places where you can go in there and still see parts of planes around. There's some morbid souvenir hunters that still go looking for that. So one of those was some type of military plane, like a good-sized plane that went down, but it tends to be more the smaller, like the private aircraft.
Yeah. Well, and with those big mountain peaks and that type of stuff, you know, the weather changes quickly with the wind coming up those peaks and those valleys, and being there this past weekend. I mean, you can just watch on the mountain how the mist and the fog forms and just comes out of the trees and turns into a cloud. And
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing.
And we were talking about Klingman's Dome. I remember I was up there one time. This was in the summertime. Now it was getting late in the afternoon, but I was standing up there on the observation tower and watched those clouds form, and they came up the mountain and then covered up the area there where I was. It got to the point just within a few minutes that looking out, you couldn't see the mountains anymore. All you could see was this, I mean, literally pea soup fog that there was. So you can imagine. And it, in some places, you know, it's like that on the ground too. So
Yeah.
you could get lost in the fog in the air or in the woods.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting place. I love going there. I think it's so peaceful. And there's something, like you said, there's an energy about it. But to me, it's a very calming energy for the most part. But in Tennessee, having all the courts that we have and that type of stuff that, you know, people theorize carries energy, I could see to where it would be a hot spot for, you know, all this paranormal stuff. And also, yeah, and also, you know, it's the most visited national park in the country, which I find surprising because you figured, you know, Grand Canyon or Yosemite or something like that are.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, last year, even with everything that was going on, the Smoky still received 12.1 million visitors.
Wow.
And I think Yosemite only got like 3 or 5 million or something. It wasn't anywhere near the 12. But it's, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there. The synchronous fireflies, the foliage in the fall. I mean, that's some of the most beautiful leaf displays you'll ever see in the Smokies. New England comes close, but have a lot of leaf lookers that come in the fall. I mean, they charter tour buses from other states and bring them in there with the bus loads.
Yeah, it's definitely a busy place. Even with it just being, you know, in April, not even the peak season. When I was up there, it was just bumper to bumper traffic and people just everywhere.
Yeah. It's an amazing place. It's a fun place. I've got nothing but good memories from there. Although I have had a couple of close calls, I've gotten lost in the woods up there. But one of the strangest things, and this happened years ago, I'd been to Klingman's Dome and was headed back down the other side. I was in an area where there's a lot of red oaks and things in some of the lower elevations there. And I was off trail, had GPS, and I saw something that looked interesting, and I went over there to look at it, and I found this little clearing, Eric, and in this clearing was the most amazing oak tree I've ever seen. Like I said, you have red oaks and stuff up there. They're common at the lower elevations, but this was like a different kind of oak or something, and it looked so real as to not even be real. It looked like a Disney Imagineer had made this tree and put it in there. And I'm walking around and I'm looking at it, and just something inside my head was like, wouldn't that be a nice place to just sit down and relax, just lay down, you know, maybe at the base of that tree, take a nap. And I'm thinking, you know, yeah, that's, and then I'm like, wait a minute. No, it's evening. It's the sun's going down. I need to get back on the trail and then back down the trail out of here.
Right.
But I've wondered if that doesn't happen, that there's something in nature there, or whether it is something supernatural or just the effect that it has on people.
Yeah.
That a place can have on people, or if there's something in the air, or, you know, it could be some kind of mold spores or a geomagnetic anomaly or something that kind of lulls you into that. You know, oh, this is nice. This is peaceful. This is, you know, I should just sit down and go to sleep. You know, then you end up like Rip Van Winkle. And I could be one of the missing people in the Smokies.
Right. I have to tell you, the first thought when you said that you thought it was strange is when Steve Stockton, after all the stuff that, like, I watch your YouTube videos and, like, we've talked before, I've been on your show and reading your books. When you say something is strange, my ears definitely perk up and you have my undivided attention, because anything that has happened to you that you think is strange is definitely weird.
Yeah, there's been a few like that, but that was one. There's another tree like that down near Fort Loudon. If you go to the Sequoia Museum there, in the parking lot, or one end of the parking lot, there's an Indian mound there where the remains of several Native Americans are buried. Well, if you go around behind that mound, there's another tree like that in the woods. They're just a few steps into the woods, and it's big, it's ancient. I'm not sure what kind of tree that one is. It might be a beech tree or something, but it's been there several hundred years. You can tell by looking at it. But that's somebody's power spot. The whole area around that tree on the ground, it's bare of anything. I mean, there wasn't even dead leaves and stuff there. And the last time I was there, somebody had a little folding chair sitting back there. So I don't know what or who, but that's another one of those. It didn't even look like a real tree. It looked like something had been made and stuck in there. But that time I didn't get the feeling that this would be a good place to lay down.
Right.
I got the feeling that I don't belong here. It was like if you walked into somebody's house that wasn't home and they're going to be back in any minute and you're not supposed to be there. It was that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And I got out of there. I've gone back and looked at it a couple of times since. But again, if you ever go to the Sequoia Museum there in Fort Loudon, go behind the burial mound there and check out that tree. And maybe you can figure out what or where, what's up to. That's somebody's power spot. There's some kind of energy there.
Yeah, I haven't experienced anything that strong, but there was out in Charleston, South Carolina area when I used to go out there. There's they call them angel oaks, and they're these giant oak trees that are probably 1,000 years old, hundred years old, and they're just massive, and probably the trunk's probably 80 feet around. And they just capture your attention. And like you're saying, it's like something out of a Disney movie, but it's just almost mesmerizing and kind of, it just has a feeling about it.
Yeah. But that one, it wasn't a particularly malevolent energy, but it felt like it could turn that way real quick if I just kept hanging around. And there's probably, like, in England, they have a famous ley lines through Europe where they connect all those medieval power spots and things. Like if you go on a straight line from Stonehenge, it takes you to this and that and the other. I would like to see somebody do that here and connect some of these just lesser known. I mean, that's basically an unknown. I've written about it, and actually I had a lady tell me about it. Was how I found out about it. It's in my first book, I think, Strange Things in the Woods. But there's these, you never know. I mean, that's one of the things about being out in the woods and exploring and going off trail and stuff. You can find these weird little places, usually a clearing or maybe a place in the rocks or something that just, it feels different. I mean, it's palpable. You can feel the energy there. I felt it in the Smokies, like I just described, felt into that tree there at Fort Loudon, Joshua Tree in California. That place has got a strange energy. Superstition Mountains in Arizona, Sedona in Arizona. That's famous for whatever portal or vortex or whatever's there.
Yeah. There's
one on Mount Shasta in Northern California. And then just a little farther up, you go across the border into Oregon, Crater Lake. It's just a little ways up there. That's got another really strange energy. There's a vortex there that they talk about. And a lot of missing young men from the Crater Lake area. So I don't know how it all ties together, but I think it does somehow on some level.
Yeah, and Mount Shasta is another one of those that's a huge cluster of weird missing happenings. And just so this book, this is the first of a trilogy that you're doing.
Yeah, at least a trilogy. It may be more than that. But and the volume 2 is already up for pre-sale, which I didn't know they were going to do. It's not coming out in bookstores until August 17th. But it's going to cover California, in particular, Yosemite, Joshua Tree, and Mount Shasta. Now, I kind of fudged that a little bit. Mount Shasta is technically not a national park, even though this is National Park Mysteries and Disappearances. It is a national wildlife area, so I figured that was close enough.
Yeah.
And there are, but there's just so much strange stuff on and around and in Mount Shasta, apparently. There's UFOs, there's Bigfoot, there's ascended masters. There was a guy back in I think it was in the 20s that claimed to have met Saint Germain walking around up there, and that he had ascended his corporal body and was this figure dressed in glowing robes and stuff, and actually through channeling taught this guy his philosophy, I guess you would call it. And this person, I can't remember the man's name, but he started a church based on this, and at one time had a couple million followers.
Wow.
And the only reason it failed was that was part of the thing, that he was going to teach people how to live forever, and then he died. So lost a lot of his followers there. But there's still a reading room there in the little town that's just adjacent to Mount Shasta. It's called Weed, California. I've had people say that, well, that's the town named Weed. That could be part of the problem there. But it's a strange little area. A lot of there's a hippie vibe, new age vibe there, but there's all kinds of weird stuff on Shasta. That's where, if you've ever heard the story about the robot grandmother, that happened on Shasta. A little boy had gone missing and was in the woods for several days, and then they found him sitting just on the side of the trail, waiting for somebody to find him in an area that they'd already searched. And then he had this long tale about a robot that looked like his grandmother but wasn't his grandmother, had took him into a cave, and in the cave he saw rusted weapons and gold and skulls. And she tried to get him to defecate on a piece of paper, and he wouldn't do it. And she's like, well, since you're not going to cooperate, I'm just going to take you and put you back on the trail. And then they found him. Yeah. But the weird thing about that, the grandmother that he claimed to have seen, she had been hiking in the same spot on Shasta, or camping in the same spot prior to that. And I don't remember how much prior. It'll be in the book. But she had an episode where she fell asleep in her tent. When she woke up, she actually came to outside several yards from her tent, face down on the ground, and had 2 puncture wounds in the back of her neck.
Wow.
No idea how any of that transpired. So that's, part of the story is maybe whatever happened to her was when they took DNA or whatever they took to replicate and make robot grandmothers. So there's all kinds of stories like that on Shasta. I've been there. It's a weird feeling place.
Yeah, and that's another place that the Native Americans kind of revered and have lots of legends about, was Mount Shasta.
Yeah, and there's certain tribes that'll stay away from there. Certain tribes will only go certain places, and then some just seem to ignore it. So hard to say, just depending on what their beliefs are. It's had one of the most unusual Bigfoot sightings there ever reported. Years ago, a lady reported seeing a female Bigfoot nursing a baby Bigfoot on the slope there in Mount Shasta. It's the only time that I'm aware of that anything like that's ever been reported.
Yeah. And in doing the research, is there any one of these national parks, national areas that have stuck out that have the most disappearances?
I want to say that it is Yosemite, but I'd have to double check my figures on that. But it's had a lot of disappearances. And again, maybe it's just because of the numbers that it gets, but then, Smokies get more. Right. But you've got a different terrain in Yosemite, too. The environment's a lot more harsh.
Yeah, yeah.
And Death Valley National Monument, a lot of people, they tend to go missing out there, but then they tend to find them. They just wander out in the desert and aren't prepared to handle it and perish. So that one, I don't really think there's anything supernatural or anything in Death Valley. It's just pure elements. I went through there briefly. The best time to go through there is at night, but there's times that if you have car trouble in the daytime, you're pretty much in a lot of trouble. I've seen it when I lived in Vegas. I'd go out on the edge of the Mojave there, and it wasn't unusual to see 120 degrees out there in the desert. And humans aren't built for that kind of heat unless you stay hydrated extremely well.
All right. Well, I thank you for coming on today. Everybody can go check out this book, National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, The Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And like we said, it's going to be at least be a trilogy. The next one will be out in August, like Steve was saying. And go check out his other books, Strange Things in the Woods and My Strange Life. Is that the other one? I'm sorry.
My Strange World.
Go check out My Strange World. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I've read it. It's just been a little while.
After the first one, I've called it the wrong thing too. I've mixed up this new one too. I changed the title a couple of times, but after I did, actually, my Strange Things in the Woods was 2 volumes. There was Strange Things in the Woods and more Strange Things in the Woods. And then when I went with Beyond the Fray Publishing, they put those into one. Then when those 2 were first out, I'd go on to shows like this or radio shows or places where people could call in, and invariably the host or the callers or somebody would want to know, well, these are great stories. These are ones that you collected from other people. What kind of personal experiences have you had? What have you had happen to you? That's how my My Strange World came. I had to think about it for a minute.
But everybody can go check those out. They're available on Amazon, Kindle, Barnes and Noble, anywhere you can find books. And also, you want to hear more stories from Steve, definitely check out his YouTube channels, 13 Past Midnight and Missing Person Mysteries. Missing Person Mysteries, that's my favorite YouTube channel. Ever since I talked to you the first time last year on the show here, I've been watching lots of stuff. And also, it was awesome for me I had a blast coming on your fireside chats.
That was a great episode. I enjoyed having you on there.
But everybody go check out YouTube, check out Steve's books. And I thank you again for coming on the show again. And
yeah, my pleasure.
Look forward to talking to you again soon when in August when the next one comes out in season 2 of the Unseen Paranormal. Here we'll have to have you back on and talk about that book.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. I just want to congratulate you on all the success you're having. You got a great show, and
thank you.
Put a lot of effort into it, and it shows. You get a lot of recognition, and that's awesome.
Thank you so much, Steve. All right, everybody. As usual, stay safe out there. Have a good day. Join us next time for a new episode of The Unseen Paranormal. Until then, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or at our website, unseenparanormalpodcast.com. And don't forget to like, review, rate, and share with all your friends. Thank you to my friend Chris Lips for the awesome theme music. Listen to our theme song and more of his music at chrislipsmusic.com. And remember, some of the scariest things are unseen.